Good morning, everyone. It's 11 a.m. and we are here for our 8th webinar in our 2020 PBIS webinar conference. This is being presented by the West Virginia Behavior Mental Health Technical Assistance Center, and the TA Center is a collaboration between the West Virginia Autism Training Center at Marshall University and the West Virginia Department of Education's Office of Special Education and Student Support. My name is Alicia Zeman, and I am the school-wide PBIS coordinator for the TA Center. The TA Center houses many different projects for the state of West Virginia, including both school-wide and early childhood PBIS and youth mental health first aid. We are so excited to bring you this conference. If you've attended, you've heard my spiel, but this is in response to having to cancel our annual conference that we typically have in Charleston. That would have been actually this week, but we are so lucky that so many of our presenters have agreed to present in this format. A few housekeeping things. We're going to keep you all muted. This is being recorded, and with Dr. Conaway's permission, we will be sharing this on social media and on our YouTube. And if that's not okay, Dr. Conaway, we can talk later.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay. And so this will be available for viewing at later times. We wanted you to know that we will be sharing the link for the sign-in survey or feedback survey towards the end of this presentation. And what that will allow you to do is to sign in for attendance certification. After you press submit, there will be a screen that you can either print off or screenshot that you can keep in case your county would like to see that you attended this as a professional development. And we also will have documentation for that, but only if you sign in using the sign-in survey. We're not going to be doing questions live. If you do have questions for Dr. Conaway, you're more than welcome to write it in that sign-in survey. There's a question for that at the end, and we will get those questions to him, and we can get the answers for you. I will be using the chat to fill you in some information about where you can request TA from the Technical Assistance Center, or where you can find our PBIS page or my email. But I also want to take a minute, and we did this in the last webinar, but I want to take a minute to talk to you about West Virginia ABLE. West Virginia ABLE is a savings and investment plan designed to give people with disabilities more independence and financial security. But we need your help to inform parents with children that have disabilities about West Virginia ABLE and the life-changing benefits that it can give them. Before ABLE was in place, individuals receiving SSI or Medicaid were not permitted to save more than $2,000 without being at risk for losing those public benefits. With West Virginia ABLE, individuals with disabilities can save and invest well above the $2,000 limit without being at risk for losing eligibility for public benefit programs. Less than 1% of eligible individuals actually own an ABLE savings account, and West Virginia ABLE is still fairly new, and they're working hard to get the word out and to inform eligible individuals that West Virginia ABLE exists. But like I said, your help is needed. And as stated by the West Virginia Disability Rights Legal Director, the ABLE legislation is one of the most important pieces of legislation we've seen in the past 20 years for individuals with disability. So here in a few minutes, I'm going to share about 3 different links for you. I would love for you to click those, save those in your browsers. Of course, pay attention to Dr. Conaway, but keep those later so you can save it with anybody. Save it to provide that information for anybody that you know with individuals living with disabilities. But today, we're going to get started with our webinar. Dr. Jason Conaway is the coordinator of autism spectrum disorders for the West Virginia Department of Education. He has been in education for 17 years, serving the students of West Virginia in many capacities. He was a special education teacher for students with autism, intellectual disabilities, behavior disorders, and learning disabilities. Dr. Conaway is a national certified school psychologist and was a school psychologist in public schools in West Virginia and Ohio. He was trained and given multiple assessments relating to behavior reduction and autism. He was a school administrator at a middle school where he oversaw special education in many capacities. He has done numerous presentations throughout West Virginia and Ohio on multiple topics, including autism, behavior modification, best instructional practices for special education students, high expectations, student engagement, time on task, behavior and discipline, providing special education accommodations in the general education classroom, and best practices for special education students in the least restrictive environment. Dr. Conaway has authored several documents specific to supporting students with autism, and we are so excited that he is here to share his knowledge with us, and we hope that you enjoy his presentation. Dr. Conaway, the webinar is all yours.
All right, guys, thanks. First, I want to say thank you for Behavioral Mental Health Technical Assistance Center, the Autism Training Center, for just allowing me to present this presentation to you guys today. I so look forward to just spending this time with you and just being here with you, and just talking with you a little bit about some reduction tips for discipline. Throughout the career, I was a school administrator in a middle school, which if you've ever been in the middle school's tough. They're coming alive. They're starting to find out who they are. But with that comes discipline. With it comes other problems or other situations, I would rather say. So I'm going to share with you some of the tips that I had when I was an administrator in a middle school and being a school psychologist in a rough district that I had when I was in Ohio. So, guys, I look forward to being with you for the next hour or so. And like I said, if you have any questions, just let me know here and through the email. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about just about what a behavior is. Now, if you don't know, I know that we know what behavior is, but I'm going to give you a pretty good definition of exactly what a behavior is. We're going to talk about some of the 4 functions. There's only 4 functions right now that are research-based that why a student performs a particular behavior. I'm going to go over with you about some ABC data, how to interpret it, what to take, some proactive supports for preventing inappropriate behaviors, as well as some strategies and interventions for managing inappropriate behaviors. I wouldn't want to give you some strategies, but I want to tell you what you can do with that inappropriate behavior and how to work with that. I'm also going to give you some alternatives to discipline, because a lot of times the out-of-school suspension does not work. It's what students want, and we'll go over a little bit about that today. First, I want to give you this disclaimer. Remember, never, ever discuss a child's behavior in front of him or her. That is a great way, or an easy way, to lose credibility. We don't want to discuss that child's behavior in front of her and say, Billy does this or Susie does that. A child's behavior should only be discussed by those who have an educational interest in that child. Don't go to the lunchroom. Don't go to the lounge. Don't go on social media. Don't ever go on social media and discuss a child's behavior. Remember FERPA. That's the quickest and easiest way to get you in trouble, the quickest and easiest way for to lose your credibility within the community, within your environment, within your school. So what is a behavior? B.F. Skinner, I'm a big fan of B.F. Skinner and the research that he does. And he gave a great definition for behavior. But what I want to look at is basically your environment. Your environment can be a predictor of your current behavior. Think of a classroom. Think of a classroom within your district. Think of a classroom within your school. Think of a classroom wherever you're at. Think of the way the classroom is organized. Is it visually pleasing? Is there stuff on the walls? Are there too much stimuli? Many times these classrooms that have problem with behavior management, the ones that are overstimulating, the ones that have too much stuff. Now, I know I've been in many, many elementary classrooms. And at times, walking into a kindergarten classroom, they are at times overstimulating for me. But that's all necessary stuff. That's all learning tools. But think about it. Many times there's classrooms that are disorganized and are the ones that are having the behavior management problems. Also looking at our students with autism. Many times the environment can be overstimulating and not visually inviting to those students. Therefore, that causes the overstimulation. And sometimes those students will exhibit negative behaviors due to that overstimulation in the environment. Environment is a very important factor when looking at behavior management. An environment are easy things to change. We can change the environment pretty easy when we look at ways to modify student behavior. The environment should be the first thing that you look at. Now let's look at the types of behavior. There are only 2 types of behavior. There's a positive behavior and a negative behavior. Now we can sit here and talk about all day about positive behaviors we want to see and what we do and negative behaviors, because I'm sure that if we would have a discussion, we can all share that story about that one time that kid did this or that negative behavior. But just looking generally at behaviors, there's really only 2 types. There's only a positive behavior and a negative behavior. And in schools, we want that positive behavior to be the most prominent behavior. We want that to be the behavior that we see the most. And I'm going to discuss with you a little bit today about ways we can get more positive behavior within our schools, because with the positive behavior, On time on task is better. Engagement is better. Student behavior is better. The overall well-being of the classroom is better. So I'm going to talk with you a little bit about how to share that positive behavior and how to spread that positive behavior. Looking at students where chronic misbehavior is a problem, we must first look at what the function is that that behavior is serving. And I'm going to share with you here shortly what the 4 functions of a behavior are. Then we need to determine how we can replace that function in a more positive way. So basically what we want to do is we want to find out what purpose is that behavior serving. Why is this student doing this particular behavior? Because every behavior has a purpose. You're hungry, you eat. You're tired, you sleep. There's many behaviors that serve a function. So what we've got to do as teachers and what we've got to do as school employees is to find out what is the payoff for that student. Why is that student performing this behavior, whether it's negative or whether it's positive? And if it's a positive behavior, we want to say, okay, what are we doing right that is encouraging this positive behavior? And that's what we're going to work with a little bit today. And a lot of the times, especially with our students with autism and with many other students, communication can sometimes be the barrier. They can't communicate in any way. They get that need met because of their lack of communication. They may not be able to tell you how they're feeling, what they're thinking, and therefore they act out because they get the attention that they need when they act out from that lack of communication. Let's look at bullet 2. It's ultimately more effective development of the interventions. Understanding ABC data will be used to guide intervention selection for those students exhibiting constant challenging behaviors. So basically what we want to do is like what we discussed here, a reoccurring misbehavior. What we want to look at is where is that reoccurring? Look at the environment. If a student every day acts out in the cafeteria, a simple, easy behavior management technique is not allow that student to go in the cafeteria for a period of time, or teach them how to act in the cafeteria. Some students may not know how to act in the cafeteria. Many times I've seen, younger kids and even older kids, and especially our students with disabilities, it might be an overstimulating environment, and just taking them out of that environment, not as a punishment, not as something that we're going to do for them, but just to take them out of that environment might be enough to change that recurring misbehavior. The environment is the easiest thing to change when we're looking at modifying behavior. And as I said before, here are the 4 functions of a behavior. The first one is the sensory. It can be overstimulated, can provide sensory experiences, provide good feeling or relief. Can happen anytime triggered by anxiety. Anxiety can cause oversensory. Escape, to get out of a situation. An attention and a tangible. We can hold that carrot out in front of a child and say, this is what we're working for. It's a positive behavior support, a lot like what PBIS does. This is what we're working for. We're working for these dollars. We're working for these tools. We're working for this token. A tangible can be a great behavior, but when you're looking at tangibles, be sure that it's something that student wants. If I'm working towards something, then it's got to be something that I want. I love my job. I love the people I work with. I love what I do. But if I didn't get paid, then that's my tangible. That's why I'm working toward what I'm working for. And that's what we've got to find. What we know about behavior. Probably behavior serve a function, and it's to get something. Have control, avoid escape. The function of the behavior is not the problem. New behaviors are taught should serve the same functions. That's why we talk about this. We need to provide interventions. We need to provide things that are serving the same purpose of that function. If it's attention, provide them positive attention to reduce that negative behavior. Because students know if I'm craving attention and I act out, I'm going to get that attention. So let's provide other means in order to serve that function. Let's provide other means. Let's find out what that function is. And again, it's only 4. Now we can say it can be one behavior can serve multiple functions, as we're going to see here shortly. But let's provide what that function is in a more positive way to serve the same function. What we know, Billy hits. It could be for a sundry of reasons, a number of reasons. It could be for escape. He doesn't like the teacher. He doesn't like the environment. He doesn't want to be in math class. It can be avoidance. It can be attention. It can be pure attention. It could be power. It could be like that, showing power struggle to get control of the environment that they might not feel control in. So as we said, Billy hitting may have multiple functions of that behavior. There may be multiple reasons why Billy is hitting. And that's what we've got to do. If we want to change that behavior, we've got to take data to find out what the function of that behavior is, and then provide a better way to meet that function, to meet that behavior. Now, when we're looking at functions, don't be unrealistic to students. Don't lie to them. Don't look at them and say, if you quit hitting, then you'll have friends. Well, that might not be true. And it may be true. If somebody's hitting me every day and then they quit and I start talking and I find that they're a pretty good person, then they may become a friend, but they may not. Like you said, if you stop swearing, you will have a job. You may not have a job. You may not be able to do that. So don't say, if you do this, then you will do this. But if you do, make sure that's realistic. If you study, then you will get a better grade on a test. That's probably a realistic statement to say. So when we talk with kids, don't say, if you do this, make sure what that is realistic and can possibly happen. Because if it doesn't, if you stop studying when you have a job and a student applies for a job or does something in the classroom, it could be line leader, it could be this, it could be anything in the classroom, and then that student still doesn't get that job, then you've just burned that bridge. You've just said, that student said, well, I'm not working toward anything because you lied to me. So be trustful, be worthy in what you say, make sure that it's feasible to do. Now let's look at the ABCs of behavior. And I'm sure that many of you have heard this and many of you have seen this. We've got the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. The antecedent is exactly what it says. It's what comes right before the behavior. And the antecedent can be anything. And an antecedent can be the number of people in the environment, can be specific to the environment, time, day. It can be, a lot of times with our students with autism, the antecedent may not be something that came exactly right. It might be something that they've been talking about for a couple months or a couple weeks or a couple of days before that they are just now coming back up with. And that might be the antecedent. At times that's difficult, but a lot of the time, the environmental antecedents are the ones that are easiest to change. We want to increase positive behavior and reduce misbehavior. Now, I think we all know what a behavior is. The antecedent in this situation is the work is too hard. He doesn't want to do it. So what's the behavior? He throws his chair. So we all know what the behavior is. And then the consequence. Now, the consequence at times is something that we've got to work on. It happens exactly after the behavior. Now, in this case, the work is too hard. The student throws his chair. The consequences is the teacher gets angry, gets sent to the office, and what happens? He still doesn't have to do the work. So what's the likelihood that's going to happen when that behavior comes up again? If the work is too hard, what's Billy going to do again? He's going to throw that chair. Why? Because throwing that chair got him out of doing the work that is too hard. Now let's look at what we could be doing. Let's look at and say, the work is too hard. Let's provide Billy some work, some help. Let's get him some help. Maybe a peer tutor. Maybe the teacher can help him. Whatever works for Billy or Susie is what we need to do. We need to replace that behavior of throwing the chair with, okay, I can raise my hand and I can get some help. I can raise my hand and I can do something different than throw the chair to get the same thing. Maybe the room is overstimulating and they need to leave the room. So maybe they're throwing the chair. Provide alternate means. So that's what we need to do. Look at more positive ways to find better behavior. Communication deficits equal inappropriate behaviors. Again, a lot of times with our students with autism, and a lot of times with other students at times, complex feelings they don't understand. Some do, but especially our younger students. I hear my little girl say all the time, it's my son and her picking, and she says, he makes me so frustrated. Now, my little girl's 6, very smart little girl. I'm going to brag on her for a minute because I've got your attention. But does she understand what it truly means to be frustrated? No, she's heard mommy and daddy say, you're making us frustrated. Or she's heard my son say, you're making us frustrated. But that's a complex problem. But she understands that how she feels and how she's feeling and a better way to do that. So at times we need to help and provide them that better means of communication in order to have that appropriate behavior. And a lot of times, again, our students with autism act out and show behaviors that are inappropriate because they can't communicate their wants and needs because they don't understand that social reciprocity. Now, authors Sousa and Tomlinson tell us that attending the social emotional needs of students is not a digression that draws time away from teaching academic subjects, but rather it is an important part of classroom practice. When students lose faith in their ability to learn, they often turn to counterproductive ways of coping, such as misbehavior or withdrawal. So looking at Sousa and Tomlin's research, we have to address the social emotional needs of students. And with this pandemic coming out and all that's going on, that should be on our forefront here, looking at the social and emotional needs of our students. A lot of students have gone home for these, it'll be almost 6 months before they come back to school. And they have done nothing. I mean, some students have done absolutely nothing. They may not have eaten. They may have, have many social emotional needs that they have come together. Are those barriers to learning? Of course they are. Of course, these things are things that we need to help with our students to learn, but also increase that knowledge that we are here to help. We're going to help you, and we are here for you. That we're going to catch up. You're okay. It's going to happen. There's many benefits to a positive environment. Looking at the benefits to a positive environment. If I want to learn for you, thinking back at your teachers, the teachers that you like better, did you work harder for? The coaches that you had that you liked that were on your side, did you work harder for? Of course. And that's what we need to do. We need to start changing that perception of learning to a more positive environment, that we are here for you, that we're going to work for you. And the importance of building relationships. Now, we need to take the time to create a positive learning environment for our students. If a student feels belong, they feel comfortable, it's going to decrease appropriate behaviors because they don't want to disappoint you. They don't want to do things. I taught students with emotional behavior disorders years ago, and a lot of the times these students had a hard time being in a regular classroom. But when they would come into my environment, which I taught a pull-out classroom, they would be more. For one, it was a small environment. For two, they knew that I had their back and that I was not judgmental. A student is going to work better for those that they know that the teacher is on their side. The teacher is not going to be judgmental, and the teacher is going to help. So the first thing we need to do is build that positive relationship. What perception do your students have of you? And that's the first thing we need to look at. How do your students perceive you? And how can we do that? How do we build those relationships, but also setting our boundaries? Start the day with a warm smile and a greeting. You've seen those videos where the kids come into the classroom and the teachers smack hands and high fives and do the dances and do all those things. Now, I'm not saying that every teacher needs to do that because that might not be who you are. But what I am saying is, start with a warm smile and a greeting. Hi, how are you? And give a smile. Sarcasm, talking negatively is never really a good thing. I mean, unless you have that relationship with that student, but that's building that relationship, knowing that that student can handle that they understand that sarcasm, it's not personal. Take time to get to know your students outside of classroom. Go to a soccer game if they play soccer. Go to a football game if they play football. Go to a play if they're in a play. Don't be afraid to let the students see, outside of the classroom, who they are and what they are. Go to things that they're involved in. But also on the same side, set high and realistic expectations for your students. Encourage them to talk with you, encourage them to be the best that they can be. More positive relationship strategies. Teach and demonstrate social and emotional skills. Students may not understand how to act in a social environment, especially our students with autism. But more importantly, a lot of students don't know the general conversation rules because they don't have to. We've got social media, we've got text, we've got Facebook, we've got Twitter, we've got, all the other wonderful things that are out there, Instagram. Kids don't have to interact anymore. So they might not understand the social reciprocity of the world. They may not understand, how to carry on a conversation, how to walk into a conversation. A lot of the times I've got a little boy and he's 9. And that's the things that I try to teach him. Just because you're talking with somebody and you're not interested in Fortnite, you're not interested in Minecraft, you're not interested in, the latest football game that came on TV, that doesn't mean that you can't sit and listen. That doesn't mean that you can't say, well, I don't know anything about that. Please tell me about that. Talk to me about And that's okay. Be sure and praise them in public and correct in private. That's a big thing. Never call a student out in class and say, Billy, this is the third time I've talked to you. That's not building a bridge. That's burning a relationship. Correct in private, praise in public, and correct in private. If you see a kid walking down the hall, don't be afraid to say, hey, Johnny, I see that you're walking down the hall today, not touching anyone. That's a great job. Give a high five, give a fist bump. And when I was an administrator, I had pockets of candy all the time. I was always giving a student maybe a mint, maybe a little cinnamon disc, or maybe something like that. I'm not saying that that's something that you should do, but that's what worked for me. Kids would do anything in the world for, at times, a peppermint. Kids would do anything for a Werther's. These are all things that I did that worked for me. So build that relationship, and don't be afraid to say, hey, Johnny, you're doing a good job. It's easy to praise that student that always does a good job. Sometimes you've got to look a little harder for Johnny that misbehaves 9 out of 10 days for that one day that, man, you sat in your seat for 30 seconds today. Great job. Great job. We've got to find something good for them. We've got to find a positive. Every student, every person has something positive, and everybody wants to hear it, whether they say they want to or whether they don't. Be proactive, not reactive. Looking at policy 4373 states on page 16, out-of-school suspension is not recommended consequence for intervention for level 1 and level 2 behaviors. However, the determination of interventions and consequences is at the discretion of the school administrator. So it's completely up to the school administrator. But looking at page 17, the purpose of the suspension is to protect the student's school, protect the students, school personnel and property, the educational environment, and the orderly processes of the school. Suspension is considered a temporary solution to an inappropriate behavior until the problem that caused the suspension is corrected. So be proactive. I truly feel that we can reduce suspensions, we can reduce inappropriate behavior within the school if we try to put out fires before they become blazes. Now, we're going to have fires, we're going to have problems that we have, but let's be proactive, not reactive, like in this classroom. They didn't help me cover this in my classroom and in any of my education courses. Let's go in with a plan. Go in with a plan, be prepared. Expect appropriate behaviors. Set rules and set consequences for breaking those rules. A lot of the times kids don't know, they're going to push it, but they got to know where they can push and where they draw a line, and draw that line, the same line for everybody. I know every situation has different things that could happen, but draw that line and be fair, consistent, and appropriate for everybody. But encourage to be proactive, not reactive. Go in with a plan. Now, you may have to revamp that plan, and that plan may not work. But go in with a plan and see where it takes you. At least you're prepared. Looking at behaviors are governed by consequences. We shouldn't look at schools and simply say, you will do this because I said so. Punish when they need punishment, but don't make it so bad that make the punishment fit the crime. The intent of the punishment is to provide consequences following a problem behavior that makes it less likely that the behavior will reoccur in the future. So that's why we punish. We want to reduce the negative behavior. Now, if the punishment that you gave is ineffective, then that's probably not a punishment that I would give anymore. Look at the behavior. Make the punishment fit the behavior, and if you're going to punish, make that punishment something that they don't like. Like I know with many students in my classroom, they love the recess. We had a recess time. They would rather be suspended for 10 days than for me to take that 15 minutes of recess away. Or they would rather be put in ISS for a week rather than miss their lunchtime. I would have more kids at times fight me over, not fight me literally, but argue with me and want to debate over, please just give me my lunch. Please just give me my half-hour lunch with my friends, and I'll not do this and this and this. So make the punishment fit the crime. But I'm not saying that make the punishment the worst thing that you can possibly do. I'm saying that if they do something, make it something that's going to be punishable, that's going to make an impact, because that's our whole reason for to make the behavior not reoccur in the future, to make it less likely that it's going to reoccur. Again, understanding that most behaviors are governed by consequences. A student has a fight, that's the behavior, and they're suspended the consequence. The consequences may be reinforcing that behavior. I had many students that got into fights because they didn't want to be there. They didn't want to be in that environment. And they knew that if they got into a fight, then they were going to get suspended for, 2 to 5 days. But that was okay because they got to go home. They got to play video games all day because their parents were at work. They got to run and do whatever they wanted to do. So make sure the punishment that you come. Now, I'm not saying that you can't follow policy, because policy says if you get into a fight, then you're going to be suspended. But what we can do is we can find other ways to fulfill that need of not belonging, not wanting to be there, rather than suspending. Find other behaviors that we can use rather than suspension. I'm not saying that there are certain behaviors that don't warrant a suspension. However, but I am saying that sometimes that suspension is reinforcing the behaviors that the students did while they're doing the behaviors. It is our job as adults to model appropriate behavior and to set an example on how to act in social situations, because at times some students may not. Some students may not know how to act in those social situations. At times, students don't know how to replace an inappropriate behavior with a more appropriate one. And that's our job as teachers and school personnel to teach them that. They may not know. So, I've been getting attention by acting out and throwing my work and throwing my chairs for so long that I don't know what else I can do to get attention. That's our job as educators. We must teach them another way. I'm going to give you attention, but you don't have to throw your chair. I'm going to give you attention. You don't have to call out in class. You don't have to be the class clown to get attention from your peers. Let's work on more positive ways to get attention from your peers. That appropriate behavior can serve the same function as the inappropriate behavior, no matter what the function may be. We can sit into a classroom. We can do this. So what I challenge you today is just to do more appropriate behaviors. Find something that can serve the same function as that behavior. And then changing the behavior. Provide meaningful incentives, providing meaningful consequences. Again, if you're having a student work towards something that they really don't care about, then your incentive is not effective. Provide me something that I want to work toward. If I love a simple thing, if I love a Dove chocolate, then I'm going to say, if you do this, then you will work for a Dove chocolate. Now, you don't want to give 25 Dove chocolates a day. That can be a list of things that you're going to provide that student to work for. But provide meaningful incentives. Make sure that what they're doing is meaningful to them and that they're going to work toward. If you're fulfilling that need of attention in the classroom, provide them with that incentive of, I'm going to give you service. I'll give you 10 minutes with me every day. I'll give you 10 minutes with me a week. I'll give you 10 minutes with your favorite person. Provide meaningful incentives to get that attention in a more positive way, in a way that's going to be better for the environment. And again, children model adult behavior. If a teacher is threatening and yelling, what do they think their students are going to do? If a principal is a yeller or a screamer, then what do you think their students are going to do? They're going to model that adult behavior, because at times those are the behaviors that they see. So remember, you are the determining factor within that school, within that classroom, within that county. Let the students model their adult behavior, because at times at home, they're not seeing that positive behavior. That's how they see an adult. Changing gears, there are two perspectives of behavior and two perspectives of a child. And that's what I want to work with you for the rest of this presentation on. Let's change your perspective of a child. The two perspectives are the child is a problem or the child has a problem. Now, these are truly, truly two polar opposites when we're looking at perspectives. I'm going to give you an example. And this is Billy. Imagine Billy is a 12-year-old boy, is sitting at a desk but refusing to do his schoolwork. He is oppositional and angry. When his parents or teachers remind him of work, he may spit, swear, or even throw his book on the floor to get the adult off his back. How would you feel when you're confronted with these behaviors? Now, I can say that none of these behaviors are tolerable. I'm not saying that these are good behaviors for any student or anyone to do. But so this perspective is that Billy is a problem. Billy is a problem. It's not that Billy has a problem, but Billy is a problem. And I hope that that's not your perspective of a lot of students. If you're looking and saying Billy's lazy, unmotivated, he's just mean, he's disrespectful, and you're probably going to have a quick temper with him. Now, I have never in my life And I've had some rough students. I've never met a student that I have not liked. I always like every student. I've been able to find something positive about every student. Now, a lot of students don't have negative qualities that I've liked to work with, but a lot of the students, every student is good. And that's what we need to look at is no child is a problem. A lot of the childs have a problem because we don't want you to have, that joy of marking a red X on this paper or that, and not that any of you do, but a lot of the times there are a lot of teachers that do. So that's what we need to change our perspective. The child is a problem. The child may have a problem. Again, we're looking at this. If you frequently you punishment students, if you're frequently yelling or moving or kicking them out of your classroom, at times you run the risk of becoming associated with that negative consequence. The teacher, you're not building that relationship, as we said earlier. You need to build that relationship. The student may say that I hate going into Mrs. Smith's class because she's going to yell at me again. They may love math and you may teach math, but then you're going to start having a negative perception of math because they hate going into your class or they do not like coming to your class or they don't enjoy math anymore because they know they're going to get yelled at. They know they're going to have some problems in that class. So don't be associated with the problem behavior. Don't let you be the problem. Don't let you be the behavior. Try not to exclude a student from the classroom because they're going to be back, and then you lose in that situation. And exactly, exclusion may actually act as a reinforcer of that negative behavior. It was designed to correct. That student's going to be back in your classroom maybe later that day, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, but you're going to have that student. So let's deal with problems as they come within your classroom. Now let's look at the other perspective. The child has a problem. Now you remember Billy that we talked about just a little bit ago. Let's go and talk about Billy again. Billy's 12 years old, again, discussing the previous model. In this perspective, he's still refusing to do his work, still oppositional, angry, reminded to get back to work. He may even threaten to punch someone and run away. That's the same Billy that we talked about before. But now we've got some data on Billy. Let's look at what we've got. What is different now is that we have assessment data showing that Billy reads at a second grade level. Before him on the table was seventh grade work. His parents recently divorced, and he's dealing with intense anger over being abandoned by his father. Now, how do we look at Billy? Do you look at Billy differently than you used to? Let's change our perspective to Billy is a problem to how can we help Billy? Billy has a problem. We need to fix and help, maybe not necessarily fix, but encourage Billy, help Billy. He's reading on a second grade level. How can we expect him to do seventh grade work? Maybe we can help him with that. Maybe we can help him read. Maybe we can go to small groups. Maybe we can get a peer. It depends on Billy's attitude, what we can do. But we need to look at Billy. Billy has a problem. Billy is not now the problem. And Billy should never look at it as Billy is the problem. What can we do? Maybe Billy doesn't know how to act in that social situation. Maybe Billy, since second grade, where he started to fall behind, has avoided the situation and has been kicked out of classrooms because that's what he knows. So maybe we need to teach some self-regulating, some coping, and some social skills. Billy, this is how you act within this environment. So look at some strategies, do some role playing, do some things that we can do, some positive reinforcement. Maybe we need to look at an IEP. Maybe we need to look at a Section 504 plan. Maybe we need to look at some counseling, some behavior intervention services, a behavior intervention plan. Maybe we need to start the SAT process. I think this would be a good situation where we look and say, Billy needs some help. He needs some specialized learning, some specialized instruction with some accommodations. Don't be afraid to say, Billy, let's have a meeting with you. Let's brainstorm, because again, I truly believe that 4 or 5 minds are definitely better than one trying to figure it up in a classroom. And maybe Billy only acts out in your classroom. Maybe Billy likes social studies. Maybe his thing is he likes reading. Maybe he likes math. Maybe he, what he likes. And Billy's maybe not acting up in Mrs. Jones's class, but he's acting up in Mr. Smith's class. So let's look at that. And we can get our heads together and say, okay, let's come up with a plan for Billy. Let's come up with a plan for any student that we need to work with. Make a shift to a more proactive model for addressing behavior. This goes right along with a lot of times what PBIS is within your schools. We're making a shift to a more proactive and reflective model. We're going to emphasize positive interventions versus student removal. We're going to change the environment to a more positive environment. We're going to have, positive reinforcers throughout the school, positive reinforcers throughout the day, some conflict resolution, some character education. I know that in the middle school that I worked in, we had quite a bit of problems with negative perception and negative attitude. We instilled John Wooden's pyramid of positive behavior within our school, and we did character traits every Wednesday. We saw within 2 years a decrease in the negative perception by students. We saw students having more random acts of kindness, and also we saw our behavior referrals decrease and the severity of our behavior referrals decrease. So just by having a more positive environment, a positive behavior, and just by putting some character ed, instilling those within students, we saw a decrease in a lot of the negative things that were happening within our school. But you have to have staff buy-in, you have to have support. Everybody has to participate in this with it being instilled in with fidelity. Provide student support such as evidence-based tiered supports for social and emotional learning. A big thing within a classroom is to provide clear and concise and consistent expectations and consequences. Now, you're always going to have that student that's going to just step over that line and draw the line. But a lot of the times, if you have students that you have clear, concise, consistent expectations within a classroom, and then you enforce those with the consequences that they shared, that you discussed with them at the beginning of school, then a lot of those times students will follow those behaviors because they feel that they have buy-in in them, because they help create them. When you're looking at classroom management, have no more than 2 or 3 rules, 4 rules at the most, is my recommendation. But let the students come up with those, and then have clear, concise expectations within the classroom and within the school. Be positive, be aware, be prepared are all things that we had within our school. Clear, concise expectations for the teachers, for the students, and enforce them with the teachers and with the students. If the teachers aren't prepared, then you know what? They're not modeling a good example for the students. If it takes an IEP, a comprehensive review, don't be afraid to go to an FBA. Get permission first for any student. Maybe go to your annual goals. Look at replacement behaviors, positive behavior supports, related services, supplemental aids and services. What we've got to do in order to help this student be successful. What is that carrot that they're going to work for? What is that we can use to help students be successful? The student behavior is challenging, not the student. Again, that is back to the perception of the student has a problem, not the student is a problem. A lot of behavior management techniques are perception. How do you perceive that student? How do you perceive the environment? What can we do to get the desired outcome for the students? Challenging behavior can change. I truly believe no matter what the behavior is, with consistent reinforcement, finding the function of that behavior and replacing that function with a more positive means, I feel that almost any behavior, and I do say almost any behavior, can be changed. I feel that we can change almost any behavior. However, the first thing that we should look at when we're looking at changing behavior is the environment, because the environment is the easiest thing to change. Take some de-escalation strategies, and I've listed a bunch of them here. Use a calm voice. I once was told by a student that I'm too loud. So I looked at that and I thought, well, okay, maybe that's something that I can change. I can talk a little more calmer. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Show no emotion. Do not get arguing or get into a shouting match. Avoid saying, because I said so. Those are never positive things. Why do I know it? Explain to them. Why do I need to sit here and do this math? Because one of these days you may need to learn slopes so that you can build a set of steps. You may learn to rise and run because you may be a carpenter and need to build something. You may want to build a house. You may need to do something. Why do I need to do this? not because I said so, because how it's going to benefit you later in life. And take the time to explain to students why they need to do that, how it's going to benefit them. Speak less, show more. Use positive words and fewer of them. You don't always have to give a dissertation on why you're doing this. Clear, concise, and to the point. And it should never be because I said so. That's not clear, concise, and to the point. Just say, we're doing this because, this will help you because, and this is why we're doing it. Why do we need some alternatives to discipline? Because the disciplinary exclusions are largely ineffective in reducing the problem behaviors. How many times do we have in our schools, multiple suspensions for the same behavior? Obviously, suspension is not a good way to solve that problem. Let's look at more. Let's look at better ways to provide replacement behavior for that behavior. Ask: is the suspension serving as a punishment to decrease the likelihood of future behavior, or is it acting as a reinforcer? Now, again, I'm not going to go back and say, being a principal, I'm not going to say that there were some behaviors that you just had to suspend for, that you just had no other choice. But looking at is the suspension reinforcing that behavior? Maybe we can get creative. Maybe they don't want to go to lunch. Maybe ISS. Policy 4373 gives you a list of things that are alternatives to what you can do. So let's pick those. Maybe if suspension is not the one, maybe we can isolation for this, or there's a multiple other things, but that's why you've got to know your students. But suspension, in my book, is never the solution to working with a problem behavior. Here's some 10 examples. Sometimes calling the dad. I had a young man that I looked at him and said, I knew his dad very well. And his dad, no matter where he was at in the county, would be at that school within 5 minutes. And if I called his dad would be there. All that I had to say is, Jonathan, and that's not the student's name, I'm going to call your father. Please don't call my father. Now, the father was not mean to the student. The father did not abuse the student, but the father was strict. But the father worked a lot. So a lot of the times the reinforcer was the dad coming to see him was just to reinforce enough because he got to get one-on-one time with his dad. And the dad didn't mind. The dad had a job that was flexible enough that he could come. And that was the thing that we had. Also, sometimes, calling the father at a young age or the mother at a young age is not a good thing because they don't want to bother with their parents with the problems. Restitution, alternative program, appropriate in-school suspension, coordinated behavior plans. These are all options that we can have that are alternatives to suspension, that are alternatives to that out-of-school suspension. And I want to look at this. A classroom teacher or administrator in a school, we are the most influential person in the school. We set the tone for learning and for expected behavior. It is our job as a school personnel to build students up and create an environment that is welcoming to all students. As we lead today, I encourage each of you to reflect on your own practices and make the decision. Am I going to build my students up, or am I going to be a barrier for them to be as productive as they should be? I look at you today and I want you to self-reflect. And I hope that throughout this, I've given you some techniques and some tips on some things that you can do rather than suspend. I feel that one of the most important things is building that relationship. Build that relationship with that student. Know that student. Know what's going on. Now, Billy was a problem until we realized, what's going on with Billy. Of course, Billy's going to act out because he can't read that 7th grade work. I want you to reflect on your practice today and look and say, am I going to build my students up and create an environment that's welcoming, that the students want to be there, that's going to be conducive for learning and conducive for the growth of our children? Or today, am I a barrier? Am I something that is causing this student not to be as successful as they should be? I hope that when you look at yourself and you say, I'm not a barrier, I'm building my students up. And by listening to this and by listening to these trainings and other trainings, I know that you're taking steps to be a better person, be a better teacher, be a better administrator. But I encourage you to self-reflect and say, am I being a barrier, or am I creating an environment that is welcoming to all students in order to build them up? And I want to leave you with this quote. Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. And today I hope that I've shared some things with you that can help you know better. So therefore, when you go back to your schools, when you go back, whenever we may go back and whatever it may look like, I hope that you are the person that can change, because now you know better, because you can do better. There's my contact information if you have any questions. If you have anything that you want to talk to me about, please email me. I'll be more than happy to talk with you and see what I can do to help. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Dr. Conaway. What a great presentation. So much of what you said really goes along with the work that we do at the TA Center. I was taking some notes, and you were talking at the beginning about changing the environment. And really, that's one of the main goals of our framework, is to make that the environment, the best environment for students to be able to be productive and happy and healthy. And then, of course, you hit on relationships. And I heard you say something. Dr. Carlson always says, from our early childhood, she always says, if you can predict it, you can prevent it. And I think that's what you were hitting on a lot towards the end of your presentation. So we appreciate you being here with us today. Everyone, I posted the link to the feedback sign-in survey. It is towards the bottom of the chat, or you might need to scroll up now. And then I posted my contact information and the information for how Oh, you're fine. Information on how you can get or request technical assistance. This is our last webinar for the week. We will have 2 more next week. On June 23rd, our West Virginia Tier 1 Model School, Clay County High School, will be talking about the work that they do. They do amazing work at Clay County, and I can't wait to hear their presentation. And then on June 25th, we'll have Jo Donna Burdoff talking about utilizing PBIS in high schools in alternative settings with older, challenging students. And I love to hear Jo Donna every time she talks. And actually, our June 30th presentation has been canceled, so that will not be happening. There was a scheduling conflict. So next week will be our last 2 webinars for June. We appreciate your support. And if you have any questions, make sure you go to that feedback survey or sign-in survey and leave those questions for Dr. Conaway. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day and a wonderful weekend. Thursday. Thank you, everyone.